I'll start with a simple definition. What do we mean by the term cult band? We need to be a little careful about how we approach the concept. For example, are Gwar a cult band? Not for me. They are definitely different. They are definitely strange. They were definitely pioneers when they started. And they do something clearly interesting that even today, many people want to see. But there is no fan base that follows and talks about this band with passion. Everyone treats them like something curious, and that's it. So, for me, there are two main parameters that define cult. First, the band shouldn't be very well known and shouldn't have had great commercial success. It has to be, as I often say, on the fringes of the underground. So, maybe slightly more knowledgeable rock fans know them, but that's about it. Secondly, those who know them must be very dedicated fans that follow them faithfully. So, they have to be a pain in the ass, to put it bluntly, regarding this band every time they talk to you. They have to believe that they are the best in terms of value, technique, innovation in something, originality in something else, and so on. So, for example, Gwar have the first, but not the second, while a band like Tool have the second, but not the first, since they've sold millions. So, both are excluded. Let's take a look at 10 cult bands of the heavy rock scene in its various forms and manifestations. They were founded in 1991 on the outskirts of New Orleans. They soon became acquainted with other future sludge metal giants like Crowbar and I Hate God. They quickly gained such a dedicated and fanatical following that when a Roadrunner representative came to see them in a club in order to sign them, their fans went berserk, caused a mini riot, and the band was left without a contract. They will only release two albums, 1994's When the Kite String Pops and 1996's Pagan Terrorism Tactics on a much smaller label. They won't do anything worth noticing commercially, but the band's reputation will become huge within the underground. The band's cult status will be solidified through a tragedy. On January 22nd, 1997, the band's bassist, Audie Ypres, and his parents were killed by a drunk driver. The band will immediately cease operations, stating that they cannot continue without the bassist. Their only release since then is a collection with the self-explanatory title Demos, 1993 to 1996. The cult following they have gained is such that in 2014 the internet went crazy, as rumors of a reunion with a new singer circulated when drummer Jimmy Kyle messaged Corey Taylor of Slipknot stating, "Acid Bath is in search of a vocalist. Please send MP3, demo, videos, or any music links performing Acid Bath songs." However, as it turned out, Kyle was not speaking on behalf of the other three surviving members, who eventually stated, "There is no Acid Bath without Audie Peter, so there will never be new Acid Bath material," and that currently, most of the surviving members of Acid Bath have been considering the possibility of doing some shows in the future as an Acid Bath tribute band. This won't actually happen until 2024 with a full reunion, initially for just one show, which will eventually become a series of concerts throughout 2025, culminating when the band took the support slot on the 2026 European tour of System of a Down and Queens of the Stone Age. Their music is only nominally sludge, as it covers a vast range of genres, starting from melancholic gothic, passing through thrash, and even including death metal growls. Their lyrics are also distinctive as they delve into very dark themes: death, mental illness, drugs, topics related to Louisiana culture, paganism, animism, etc. They often use excerpts from iconic films like Blue Velvet or A Clockwork Orange, while the artwork on their two albums belongs to serial killer John Wayne Gacy and Dr. Death Jack Kevorkian, respectively. They are a truly unique band whose status as cult legends has probably grown rather than diminished due to their 28-year absence from the music scene. I think that if they had continued, they would be absolutely huge today.
The army or the SAS rejected it.
They were founded in Devon, England in 1978, with the Miller brothers as core members throughout their career. After wandering around various parts of their area and recruiting a drummer who left because he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, they ended up living in squats in Bristol, where they released their first singles, which owed a lot to Killing Joke and had a clear post-punk sound. They released their first album, No Sanctuary, in 1983, introducing the first metal influences into their music. Their next album, Arise, of 1985, is perhaps their peak moment, as they present an even more metallic sound, practically codifying the crust punk genre. In 1986, they stopped living in squats, and in 1987, they released their third album, Monolith, which clearly followed in the footsteps of Arise. A very special case of writer's block will lead to the band's dissolution in 1987. They will return in 2008 with Roy Mayorga, a well-known member of Soulfly and Stone Sour, as their drummer. In 2010, they will release Sonic Mass, and in 2012, they will once again disband. Their music is the archetype of crust punk, meaning the use of heavy metal riffing, or even more extreme metal elements, under a purely anarcho-punk dimension and aesthetic. Still, Amebix never forgot their post-punk roots. Their music always incorporates a bit of the atmosphere of their early days. Despite being a band for only a few years in the 80s, they are considered a huge and recognized influence throughout the extreme metal scene, starting with bands from genres like metalcore and reaching all the way to black metal and everything in between. Their declared fans include Sepultura, Deathspell Omega, Neurosis, Dark Throne, Integrity, and many others. In fact, their cult status has become something of a fetish for extreme metalheads or punks, as you'll often see thrashers and black metallers wearing Amebix patches and t-shirts. They were founded in Ancona, Italy in 1977. In their early years, they revolved around two key figures, Steve Sylvester, born Stefano Silvestri, and Paul Chain, born Paolo Catena. Sylvester left the band briefly in the early 80s, and Paul Chain left for good in 1984. After a series of singles and EPs and a compilation album in 1987, they released their first record, In Death of Steve Sylvester, in 1988. Their sound started as primitive doom metal, but by their first album, it had transitioned into pure heavy metal with some elements of speed metal. Of course, it will change several times over the years, going through both industrial and gothic metal. Their albums never found a global record label and distributor, so they could become better known to a wider audience. The closest they came to doing something like that was their 2000 album Panic, part of which was recorded in the United States and produced by Neil Kernon, Judas Priest, Dokken, Nevermore. Practically, they have always remained a purely underground phenomenon in terms of sales. However, what they became most known for wasn't their sound, but their image and aesthetic in their lyrics and album covers. Even their name, I would say, is striking. They are considered the first band in history to have such a strongly anti-Christian, occult, and horror image and aesthetic. They did it long before Venom, Bathory, Merciful Fate, or the Norwegian black metal bands. I think it's clear that this is also the reason why no major record label ever wanted to even come near them, because they've always had a dedicated fan base, and there were always big crowds attending their concerts. I would call them perhaps the classic cult heavy metal band, if such a thing ever existed. The recent surge in interest in them when Tobias Forge, the mastermind behind Ghost, recognized them as one of his favorite bands, I think clearly testifies to the cult status they have always maintained.
To be discovered, cold stiff body under the covers.
One of the most dedicated Mr. Bungle successors was founded in Rockville, Maryland in 1995. They started by releasing albums on their own with a rather unclear style and mediocre production. Beginning with their 1998 album, The Embryos in Bloom, things started to get serious. Their sound improved, and their style started to crystallize. This was followed by Anarchists of Good Taste in 2001 and Committed to a Bright Future in 2003, which clearly demonstrated the band's steady progress in all aspects of their music. In 2001, the band would experience perhaps their closest moment to mainstream success when they recorded a track, Mushroom Cult, from the album Anarchists of Good Taste, with System of a Down vocalist Serge Tankian contributing vocals. This song is often mistakenly attributed to System of a Down, although Tankian was the only member who appeared on it. Musically, the band is very clearly influenced by the musical schizophrenia of Mr. Bungle's first album, and practically connects a series of diverse, often completely mismatched musical styles, which are united by a strong metallic, almost thrash undercurrent. The genre they play has been categorized by various music magazines as progressive metal, avant-garde metal, or evil circus music. Like many bands on this list, they have an album that sets them apart and can be considered their magnum opus. For them, this is the 2006 release Adultery, a loose concept album that follows the adventures of a private detective, where the band tries everything from Slayer to Johnny Cash and anything else you can imagine in between. The whole story is presented in a very cinematic way, to the point where it reminds me a lot of James Ellroy's hard-boiled novels. Just imagine that a fictional adaptation of Adultery, titled Moonlight City Drive, was written by Brian Payone and published in November 2017. Honestly, I'll never understand why the album wasn't a success. The calmer songs have a clear hit quality that, for some reason, never reached a wider audience. Apparently, even the band itself didn't understand why the album didn't do better, so they broke up in 2007. They will return in 2013 and will soon see their cult status confirmed when a crowdfunding campaign they launched on Indiegogo managed not only to pay for their 2014 comeback album, Sweet Nothings, but also for another record, Ad Nauseam, released in 2015. Imagine that there's a band with a purely death metal name, a first album whose lyrics are very reminiscent of early Carcass, and a guitarist, Mohammed Suismez, who was a huge fan of Yngwie J. Malmsteen, emulating him, not just in his playing but also in his peculiar behavior and perfectionism. This is the German band Necrophagist. The album I'm referring to is none other than their terrifying 1999 debut, Onset of Putrefaction, where the band used a drum machine, although they would later release versions of the album with drum samples recorded by a real drummer. Their second and so far last album will be the amazing 2004 Epitaph, where Suismez's unique playing will be joined by Christian Münzner's equally excellent solos, but most importantly, by Hannes Grossmann's otherworldly drumming. Practically speaking, the Germans helped outline the blueprint for 21st century death metal. Technically dazzling, devilishly inventive, and heroically heavy, Epitaph drove the metal underground wild and provided countless ideas to countless bands to exploit for years to come. For the next 4 years, the band will be touring extensively, and in 2008, they will start working on their next album with Romain Goulon as their new drummer. Suismes stated that the band would be using 7-string guitars on the album, while he was going to record with a new custom-made 7-string 27-fret Ibanez Xiphos guitar. These statements made their fans drool, but in the end, they will remain just statements. The band will perform their final live shows in 2010, and as early as 2012, it was unknown whether Necrophagist were still active and if they would eventually release a sequel to Epitaph. Since there has never been an official statement about their disbandment, fans are still passionately speculating that a third album might be in the works or even completed. Unfortunately, the isolation of perfectionist Mohamed Suismes simply added a sense of mystery and meant that any reappearance news are simply rumors, while simultaneously enhancing the band's cult status. Swans originated from New York's infamous no-wave scene, although it had collapsed by the time they were starting out. The man who defined and continues to define the band to this day is guitarist Michael Gira. While in its early years, 2 very important drummers passed through its ranks. Swiss-American Roly Massaman, who would later become a very important producer of industrial albums, and Ted Parsons, who would become well known as a member of Prong. The part of their career that interests us from a heaviness perspective is from 1983 to 1986, when they released the EPs Swans and Young God, as well as the albums Filth and Cop. We're talking about one of the most extreme music styles for the time it was released. Huge, repetitive metal riffs played at doom metal speeds, wild and aggressive drums, and lyrics delivered with such hatred that it's as if Gira is spitting them at the audience. That era of the band had a huge influence on many future extreme metal bands, such as industrial metal giants Godflesh, depressive black metal pioneers Leviathan, grindcore acts Napalm Death and Full of Hell, or death doom metal fathers My Dying Bride. From 1986, the band began collaborating with singer and keyboardist Jarbo, and their music gradually started to mellow. They would go on to record their 1989 album, Burning World, for MCA, which would sell only 5,000 copies in the UK, one of the lowest sales figures in the company's history. Their collaboration will obviously end immediately after. In the early 90s, the band would also go through a phase very close to melancholic gothic rock, although they would soon return to their now crystallized style of industrial drone noise. Gira will disband Swans in 1997. They will reunite without Jarbo in 2010 and will start recording at full throttle, giving us some of the best reviewed albums of the 21st century, most notably 2012's The Seer and 2014's To Be Kind. The music they play now has elements of noise and industrial, but at the same time, it exhibits a dynamic found in post-rock with very long song durations and constantly repeating patterns, while intense use of dissonance is also employed. Their fans swear by their name and often consider them the best thing in modern music, confirming the completely cult significance of their existence. Undoubtedly the most well-known band on the list to the point where one might wonder if they can truly be called cult. So I'll say that they are simply one of the biggest cult bands in the history of heavy rock, a status they maintain even when playing in front of thousands of people at major festivals. In fact, in my opinion, they are not just a musical cult phenomenon, but a cult phenomenon of pop culture in general. They started in Oslo in the winter of 1988. At the beginning of their career, they played something close to the subversive, satirical noise of the Butthole Surfers. In their 1992 debut album, Hot Cars and Spent Contraceptives, they would introduce the world to their unique style, which they called death punk, a dark punk rock with occasional forays into hardcore, hard rock, and metal, as well as a specific tendency towards subversive and sarcastic lyrics. They described their second album, Never Is Forever, 1994, as a tribute to Blue Oyster Cult, in an attempt to distance themselves from the low-fidelity aesthetic that was prevalent at the time. While the rest of the punk-oriented world was trying hard to be lo-fi and real, Turbonegro, as always, went the opposite way, creating a miniature suburban death opera. At that time, they appeared at concerts with their faces painted black and afro wigs. Realizing the absurdity of it, they will change their style to the more acceptable jeans and mustaches. The two albums that would establish them, so to speak, Ass Cobra from 1996 and Apocalypse Dudes from 1998, would follow, with their style becoming a bit more user-friendly, shall we say. On the verge of a major breakthrough, they disbanded in 1999 due to the singer Hank von Helvete's severe drug problems. The dissolution would exponentially increase their cult status, which culminated with the release of the tribute album, Alpha Motherfuckers, recorded over 2 years and released in May 2001, with a lineup including, among others, Queens of the Stone Age, Nashville Pussy, Therapy, Him, and Satyricon, as well as the establishment of hundreds of fan clubs with the subversive name Turbojugend around the world. So they decided to reunite in 2003. They are a very unique case of a band that plays in front of thousands of people at festivals around the world, even though none of their albums has ever charted in any country. Their style, in everything, is practically a constant war against political correctness with strong satirical elements. Their concerts are a unique event, and back in the day, the now deceased Hank von Helvete was seen inserting Roman candles into his anus and often spoke to the audience in deliberately exaggerated broken English. They are still touring today, although their last album was released in 2018.
I rock to Manhattan in what I say.
Metal Hammer calls them the biggest band no one ever cared about. That's not exactly right, but it's not far from the truth either. When they released their first album in 1990, they seemed destined to become the next big stars. They were playing a very interesting and exciting alternative metal with elements of punk, post-punk, and psychedelia at a time when the genre was starting to have its first successes and people were looking for something different. They had an absolutely charismatic frontman, Corey Clark, who could look Axl Rose in the eye at any time of day or night. They had a fiery, clear, passionate political discourse in the lyrics at a time when the change that would come to the American political scene in a few years was brewing. And finally, they had signed with the same management company as Metallica. They will release 2 more albums with the same ingredients in the next 2 years. They will participate in very large tours of the time. And for some reason no one ever understood, they will fail. So, they will leave both record label and management company, although they will continue to release albums to this day, albeit with a much more limited reach, to be honest. I call them cult because the few people who listened to them immediately became fanatical followers, and because in countries like mine, they have a significant fan base that always attends their concerts. Just consider that they are one of the very few heavy rock bands in history to have played in another Greek city besides Athens and Thessaloniki on a regular tour, not just at a festival. If you want my opinion, the reason they failed is that they were too blunt. They were telling truths that people at the time weren't ready to hear. Their attitude would have been more fitting for a hardcore punk band, not for someone who was hoping to enter the big leagues. Back then, kids wanted crybaby, grunge-type generalities. Approximately 8 years after their fall, System of a Down would achieve massive success with a similarly fiery lyrical content. Apparently, the audience was now ready to accept something like that. They were founded in Austin, Texas in 1982. They released their first album, Energetic Disassembly, in 1985 in a completely DIY manner, on their own label and with money put in by their drummer. 3,000 records and 1,500 cassettes will be printed, and the record will soon become something of a legend. Their music was a form of thrash, so innovative and technical that their first album is often recognized as the first progressive metal record ever made. Despite the difficult music they played and their completely underground dynamic, the band found a place in concerts with bands like Hellstar, Celtic Frost, Voivode, and even Slayer. Changes in the lineup followed with the departure of guitarist Billy White, who ended up in Don Dawkins' solo band, as well as singer Jason McMasters, who went on to sell millions as the frontman of Dangerous Toys. They were replaced by Ron Jarzombek and Alan Tecchio, with whom the band signed to Noise, released a regular album titled Control and Resistance, and went on their first and only European tour. Various issues within the band, Tecchio's departure, Jarzombek's health problems, led to their breakup in 1993. They will return with McMasters on vocals again for a decade, from 99 to 2009. Then he will leave again and be replaced by Tecchio once more. Amidst rumors of new releases, they will only give us one EP in 2015 titled Concepts of Math, Book 1, and then go back into hiatus. The second reunion with McMasters will finally happen in 2023. So the band is currently active and, according to their statements, is preparing new music. They practically started a small musical revolution. The combination of thrash with elements you'd find in 70s, prog, or jazz fusion was something no one had even thought of doing in 1985. Their style will be perfected on their second album, where the crazy tempo changes and mathematical structure of their tracks will once again make jaws drop. A typical cult band. Few people know them, but those who do not only swear by their incredible musical abilities, but also by their unprecedentedly original music. They'll tell you they inspired or played first at least 3 or 4 subgenres of metal, and they might not be wrong. Anyway, in recent years, they seem to have been recognized at a level we've never seen before. Better late than never, I'd say.
Just kiss my ashes goodbye.
A highly educated teacher with 3 university degrees, the mastermind behind Woods of Ypres, David Gold, was a very intelligent man who struggled to find his place in music. As a renowned multi-instrumentalist with a passion for black metal, he will begin his journey with the band playing melodic black metal with elements of folk metal, doom metal, and gothic metal, and lyrics that celebrate the forests of his homeland, Canada, while also containing various references to humanity's place in the world. His musical direction changed when he added Joel Violette, who practically changed status from a huge fan to the band's lead guitarist overnight. Gold found an equal partner in Violette, and for the first time, he didn't have to focus on writing everything himself, which gave him more time to concentrate on the details of his next album. which, written and recorded in just 6 weeks in July-August 2011, will finally be released in January 2012, be titled Woods 5, Gray Skies and Electric Light, and will be the band's masterpiece. It's a deeply depressing, almost mournful work, a captivating journey through sorrowful melodies and controlled extremity. There are also songs where a glimmer of hope can be seen, but it's essentially a collection of death elegies, such as the track dedicated to Gold's great idol, Peter Steele of Typo Negative. Musically, it now has gothic metal as its clear starting point, with a touch of doom metal. Unfortunately, Gold was killed in a car accident in December 2011, a month before the album was released. As is often the case in such instances, the reception and interpretation of his lyrics changed radically. Now everything seems eerily prophetic. The album rightfully won the 2013 Juno Award, Canada's equivalent of the Grammy, for Metal Hard Rock Album of the Year. Violette quickly realized that Woods of Ypres couldn't exist without David Gold, and disbanded the group. Despite critical acclaim, the album never achieved the status it deserved within the genre it belonged to. But just like for many bands in this video, everyone who heard it immediately became a devoted fan, justifying the band's presence on this list.